Hello. So, I am finally getting back into art. It took a really long time and a little bit of trauma, but I am getting back to art. And this is the first big completed piece I've done since I started doing art again. I didn't stop doing art on purpose. I think that a lot of people could probably relate to the fact that life got in the way. Honestly, just took away my drive and my creative energy. And I'm really excited to say that I have been, over the past couple weeks, I actually have the drive and the motivation to draw. I actually want to draw. It's wild because I really have struggled with that feeling for quite a while. I would say at least a year, if not more so. So this piece, I actually was inspired to work on. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, which is a Dragon Age tarot card. If you're not familiar with it, the Dragon Age series has a lot of symbolism that they use for their characters. And one of the ways that they do that is with tarot cards. Each character has a tarot card in Inquisition, and a really popular development of character is for people to take their inquisitors, their characters that they made, and make them a tarot card. So that's what I did. The other event that inspired this was I saw that there's a creator that I really like who is running a Dragon Age zine, and I've really wanted to get back into zines. And at the time I was thinking, oh, a zine could be a good motivator for me to actually like finish and do a piece. I know in my life, I think this is partially an ADHD thing. I tend to work with more motivation when I have a deadline or somebody or something relying on me. That made school really difficult. One of the illustration options you could choose for the zine was a tarot card design. And I didn't really have any good examples to show. My portfolio at that point, and this was only a couple weeks ago, but my portfolio at that point was very limited to a lot of my older art, and the art itself didn't necessarily relate to the zine that I wanted to be a part of. There were also some other zines I was looking into, but I had the idea, well, maybe I can make a tarot card illustration of my Inquisitor and submit that as like, hey, this is what I could provide for the zine. I didn't end up finishing it in time, which is fine because I had a lot of fun working on this still. And I didn't get into the zine, which is also fine. But I think it was a really good motivator for me to see like, okay, if I actually want to be in zines, like I think I do, I need to start drawing again. So after that, I made an office in our home. I'm very, very fortunate and blessed to say that we have an extra bedroom that I am using as an office space with one of my roommates. I also treated myself to a new drawing tablet. It's an XP Pen 24-inch, something or other. I didn't necessarily want the super big ones at first because I didn't necessarily have a good dedicated space for art, but I use a big tablet like this at my work, and I kind of got used to it being so huge. My previous tablet, I think, is like a 13-inch, which was fine. It was doing its job. Anyway, a lot of things came together, and I was able to really help motivate myself to start drawing again. I'm not going to say that that would work for everybody, but I'm very glad to say that it worked for me. So I also was really excited to utilize this piece to reacquaint myself with Clip Studio. I also, a few weeks ago, if not maybe a few months ago, but I upgraded to Clip Studio EX, which has a lot more resources that you could use, and has a lot more animation capabilities, which is also something I've been wanting to get back into. I studied animation in college, and I haven't really touched it since. So this was really fun. You'll see a lot later in the video that I mess around with a lot of different textures and colors, and I've been playing with like line art weight, and it was just so much fun. I really, really liked working on this, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. And it's a character who is very near and dear to my heart. So this is Sulahn Lavellan. He is my canon Dragon Age Inquisitor. I say canon because I have 3 or 4 other Inquisitors from other playthroughs that are also dear to me, but when I think about my, I call it my canon playthrough, which is the playthrough that I want to carry on to the next Dragon Age game, which is freaking coming out in a month. I cannot believe it. It's finally happening. I'm absolutely shook. Veilguard is going to be my entire life. So, a little bit about Sulahn. He is an elf. He's part of the Lavellan clan, and he is a mage. He is a very kind individual. He struggles a lot with the position as Inquisitor, takes it upon himself because he can see the devastation happening in the world. And if you don't know what's going on in Dragon Age Inquisition, this might not make very much sense, but if you love RPGs and or fantasy, I highly recommend playing the game. It's awesome. He's a very sweet, kind individual, a little bit to his detriment. He falls for Dorian Pavis, basically becomes friends with like everybody. He's like the most nice person you could ever meet. And I decided to choose the Ace of Cups for his tarot card. I think no matter how you feel about spiritualism and tarot cards in that regard, I think it's a really fun way to develop or illustrate a character. Ace of Cups is defined by love, new relationships, compassion, and creativity. There's also this concept in tarot, which is the reversed card. I'm not entirely sure like how it works, but it has to do with how the card is flipped when you like reveal it. But the reversed version of it includes self-love, intuition, and repressed emotions. And I just got that from Biddy Tarot. I don't know all of the different interpretations of the cards. It's kind of one of those things that has a very vague interpretation that then you can expand upon, which I think is a really cool way of developing a character. So for Sulahn, I felt like that really worked for him. I felt like the water flowing and the dove, the animals, smoke or clouds, it really felt very flowy for Sulahn. One of the biggest character growth moments he goes through in my playthrough is falling in love and learning to love and balance love in a time of great uncertainty, and also learning to embrace the love that he feels for another man. And that self-discovery and embracing of your true self, specifically with regard to love and queerness, relates a lot to me, because that is something that I've gone through, and I think a lot of other people have. It's one of the reasons I love Dorian as a character, too. He kind of goes through a similar situation in the game. We also see new relationships and compassion. I absolutely would define his character as a compassionate individual, and he loves making friends. He's a lot like me in that regard. He's very kind, to a fault, to be honest, to a detriment to his own health in certain ways, and it's definitely a big character flaw for him. He spends a lot of time during Inquisition developing relationships with all of the people around him, and some of them become friends, lovers, enemies. It's such an incredible part of Inquisition. It's probably my favorite part, is the character development and the characters. I just love good, fleshed out characters in RPGs. Oh, it's so great. So going back to utilizing this piece to learn about Clip Studio again, I've used Clip Studio on and off for several years. I mean, it's probably been like 6-7 years, but I never really took the time to truly learn all of the different mechanics that Clip Studio had to offer. So I'm taking a lot of time in this piece to like fiddle with things, fiddle with layers. At one point I was struggling with the fill tool because I couldn't remember or figure out there's certain settings you can select to make it so that when you fill an area it only fills around the line art or within the line art. I was really struggling with that. But I figured it out eventually. I actually ended up cutting out a significant amount of the recording of certain things that I tried and I didn't end up using in the piece. You'll also see at certain points I keep bringing up these reference images. These are the images obviously I'm using to help guide me in style and idea, and I honestly don't match the style of the Dragon Age Tarot very well, which is fine with me. I really love when people can match styles, but I just was kind of doing my own thing and figuring it out. Originally, I had wanted it to be more like the Dragon Age style, but I really felt like after a while that was really limiting what I could do and what I could try. All of the reference images are images from the game itself, except for one. And I'm going to put up the name of the artist on the screen because I have been having a really hard time finding them. Regardless, I was using that image. I was using it as a lot of inspiration for myself. I find it such a beautiful piece. So indicative of this character that I know nothing about other than this tarot card. So a lot of what I try to do with my character here and the Ace of Cups is incorporating colors, themes, and just overall style and just like what I was feeling. I didn't necessarily have rhyme or reason to some of the background elements. I just thought they looked cool. You see them a lot in some of the other tarot illustrations in the Dragon Age game, and so I was kind of utilizing those to bring the whole thing together. I also ended up stylizing certain aspects of Sulahn's hair and also the elk's hair, and incorporating that kind of swirly, flowy vibe from the clouds or the mist that is on the Ace of Cups card. I also take a lot of time here to mess around with line weight. I have always struggled with line weight, no matter what, no matter what brush I seem to be using. I always just, there's always something about it where I'm like, oh, it just doesn't look right. My first iteration of this, I had started to line it in Photoshop because that's what I had available at work, and I was doodling, and I hated it. The line weight was all wrong. It was really rough. One of the artists that I really admire right now, who's been inspiring me a lot, has a video about line weight that I watched that really, really helped me, which was the thing that they recommended was going back over your lines again, which is something that I've avoided doing because it just feels like whenever I try to do that, it messes up the smoothness of the lines. But anyway, that's really helped add a lot more depth to my lines. I can't remember how long it took me to sketch the initial design, but lining and rendering took me around 6 or 7 hours, and I sped up all of the recording by like 700%. But I didn't end up keeping track of how long the sketch and design originally took me. So I'm probably gonna tack on like another hour or so to my total time spent on this piece. So probably around 8 hours. Honestly, it might even have been more because of how much time I spent fiddling around. You can see a lot of me messing around with these dots, messing around with the layers, and making new brushes with the texture. It was really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. I highly recommend that if you're in an art slump, getting out of an art slump is gonna look differently for everybody, but for me, characters are my favorite thing to illustrate, and this character is very near and dear to my heart. So find a character, choose a tarot card you think relates to them as a person, and go crazy. I also have been wanting to get back into things like video editing and speed draws and stuff like this. It's always very motivating for me to be able to record and see my process after the fact. I actually really enjoy editing videos as well. I'm using Premiere. I get Adobe through my work. So yeah, I'm excited. I've really been motivated to draw and work on pieces. I'm going to be opening up commissions soon. I'll try to link that in this video if I have it up. I'm going to be using Ko-fi or Ko-fi. Everybody says it differently, so I'm not sure, but I'm going to be utilizing that website for commissions, and if you're interested, I'd love to draw your character for you. A couple more things I'm seeing as we are going is me adding these extra little details to the elk, and I think I also end up adding them to Sulahn's hair, and that just adds a little bit more texture, a little bit of varying line weight, and it was really fun to experiment with. You know, it was a stylistic choice. I don't know if I would have chosen it for a piece that wasn't going to be stylized in the first place, but I had a lot of fun. I also ended up using a couple of different textured brushes, which is something I've never really experimented with before. You'll see it later with regards to coloring. I use a lot of the watercolor brushes because you can see a lot of varying texture in the Dragon Age Tarot card designs, and I find that really visually pleasing. I found it really fun to mess around with and try to figure out how to utilize texture without it being too overwhelming. I also end up at the very end of this adding a sparrow to the top corner of the illustration. Originally it was just going to include the elk. Decided to add the sparrow because there's a dove in the original tarot card design, and I went with the sparrow because, well, I felt that the symbolism of a dove could fit with Sulahn, the sort of like peacemaker, this sort of innocence that is this purity. I really felt like, you know, it's used quite a lot, and I wanted to try to use a different bird. So I ended up going with a sparrow. This is one of those things that, of course, has been utilized in art for many, many years now, and it's one of those things that can also be interpreted in different ways. And the reason I chose sparrow was that it's this tiny little creature, this little bird that is so persistent. They continue to live and thrive despite the world changing around them constantly. I have never lived anywhere that has not included a sparrow, but I believe they're invasive in the US, which is where I live, so that's pretty funny. On some quick searches, sparrows tend to symbolize protection, productivity, joy, simplicity, unity, friendliness. And those are a lot of the things I associate with Sulahn. I also ended up adding some of that fun, stylistic curliness to their feathers to kind of tie them into the elk and to Sulahn. And also it was a nice way to balance the colors in this piece because I had a lot of browns and greens, and I was able to have this branch. I think it ends up being a greenish color at the end. I was originally going to make it brown, I think, but so then I have, you know, browns and greens at the bottom, about browns and greens with the elk and the sparrow, and so it's kind of, it's balancing visually a little bit more. So yeah, that's honestly all I have to say about this piece. I tried to trim this video down as much as I could, but I really felt like I've had a lot of people in my life say that they really enjoy seeing my process, so I wanted to include as much of the process as I could. And I hope you enjoy. Please let me know if you have a tarot card designed for a character of yours. I'm so interested in hearing about people's characters. I absolutely love it. Tell me about your Inquisitor. Tell me about your Warden, your champion. I also have ideas to do this kind of thing for some of my other video game main characters, which would include my Mass Effect Shepard. I carried the same character through all 3 games. And also my main character for Fallout New Vegas, who's also another dear, dear character to me. Thanks so much for hanging out and watching, and I'll let the music hang out with you for the rest of the recording. Thanks, guys.